Volkanovski was and is still arguably pound for pound greatest fighter in the world. How long have you known him?
I don't know the first time. I met him before he was in the UFC. When I used to live in Melbourne, he came down to train at Absolute.
Yeah.
And then we really connected on Ultimate Fighter. One of his guys he was going to bring to Ultimate Fighter, Brad Riddell, pulled out last second. So he called me when I was in Puerto Rico and he's like, do you want to coach on Tough for 5 weeks? And like I said, Puerto Rico was apocalypse now. I was like, yeah, get me out of here. So I jumped on that opportunity and we were in Vegas 5 weeks together. Because he was meant to fight Ortega and then he got hit with COVID real bad. Got stuck I think he was in hospital for maybe 1 to 2 weeks. And then before he flew back to Australia, they were like, all right, maybe we just do you guys as the Ultimate Fighter coaches. So I jumped on board with that. And that's really when we've become close.
Yeah.
Obviously, I was useful in the Ortega fight, help him get out of submissions. He fought then Korean Zombie Max Holloway. I basically just held the bucket at that point in the corner, a couple striking fights. And then again, we had to tackle the Islam problem. So I did spend 5 to 6 weeks down there preparing for that.
How did you tackle the Islam problem?
How did I tackle?
Was you somebody who barely knows anything about wrestling, having to
obviously it doesn't take much,
Yeah.
especially Russian wrestling.
Did the beard help, or what? In all seriousness, what were some of the key ideas that you worked on with Volkanovski to prepare for it?
I had the help of Frank Hickman. Hickman was down there too, one of the Hickman brothers' wrestling coach. So we were sort of like problem solving. And I mean, basically, we were confident in Volk's fence wrestling, his cage work. He's super good on the cage, super under-respected in that position. And we knew that if you were able to take the scrambles to the cage, he would be effective against Islam. Because again, Islam is background in Sambo freestyle wrestling, but I mean, honestly, he's probably got the same experience on the cage as Volks. Obviously, some of those wrestling skills will translate very well to the cage, but the cage is still somewhat of a gray area, an equalizer. And Volks, again, incredible ability to stand up, incredible defense on the cage, which you saw. We worked on strategies to get up and a ton of submission defense. Islam loves Kimuras, obviously rear naked from the back, arm bars. Those are sort of, and arm triangles, dominant submissions. But again, the guys he submitted, not grapplers. Apart from Charles Oliveira. And again, Charles Oliveira was basically knocked out at that point. So it was still impressive he submitted him. But again, I always told people this. They thought it was crazy. I was like, Charles Oliveira versus Islam in a grappling match. Oliveira is going to win that match.
Like submission grappling.
Submission grappling, yeah. So in a pure grappling skill set, I think Oliveira is a more dangerous grappler. So we didn't even come into it thinking Islam was this unstoppable boogeyman that people make him out to be. So we approached it from that, just focused on the techniques, ability to get back up, using Turtle to get back up, using Turtle to scoot to the cage to get back up, and hand fighting from there, keeping it pretty safe. But what makes Volks so special, I think, is his gas tank and his willpower. He's just unbreakable. Yeah. The Dagestani guys, Khabib, Islam, they are good at submissions, but they break guys mentally and they fatigue him. And then they take the submission that's offered. Oliveira is a guy that can jump on submissions and have an incredible technical ability to finish those submissions, whether you're fresh or you're tired. And then you combine that with Volkanovski, who incredible willpower, never gets tired. You're never going to break him. And as you saw, he only attempted one submission the whole fight.
Is that learned? Is that trained? Or are you just born with that mental toughness?
It's a good question. I mean, he's like an anomaly. Like the entire fight camp, not nervous at all. Supremely confident. The whole fight week, completely confident. He just has an attitude like, oh, everyone cast me out, we will see. You know what I mean? Islam, he's like, let's see.
No doubt.
No doubt at all. Super relaxed. Up until about 5 minutes before, and then he starts to amp himself up. He's like, you are not taking this belt from my family. He gets into that sort of mindset.
He actually says that out loud?
You can't teach that survival he did in the Ortega fight, you know?
Have you guys ever been like pushed to the limit like that or broken in a grappling match?
I'll do it in practice. Like I'll push myself to like, I think I might pass out or die or something. Like as far as like how tired you get, because like in a match,
You
depending
try
on
not to ever get close to that in the match.
Yeah, you try to, because it's important to understand where your exhaustion point is. But yeah, if you have to push to that limit in a match, you're probably doing something wrong. Like if you see in matches where guys sprint the last like minute, they try to win the match in the last minute, and it's like you definitely had some mistakes leading up to that. If you have to, kind of go balls to the wall.
Okay, but has there been ever times in competition, especially like early on, because you wrestled pretty hard, and wrestling is pretty exhausting. Like not wrestling, but wrestling style kind of thing, going against the best people in the world.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely. Again, I think in practice it's important to do that hard work. That where competition is much easier. I think if you redline in practice and you really push to like death's door, then once you're in competition and you're working with, you're being fresh in a comp. I mean, it's much better.
Have you ever been to that thing where Dan Gable talks about always wanting to be to a place where you can't get off the mat? Like you work so hard in the training room, you can't get off the mat. And I think he says he's failed at that in his career. He was always able to at least crawl off the mat.
Yeah, I definitely never like actually died on the mat, but I felt like I was gonna die.
Sure. What about you? Do you quit all the time?
I get a light cramp. I'm like, you know what? You got me, man. Let's do this again tomorrow. That's it.
Dude, if I'm asking Craig for a roll, he's in the bathroom somewhere.
Do you see the value of pushing yourself like to that place where you're knocking on death's door?
Yeah, but within safety, because obviously the most serious injuries occur when you're tired, overtraining and stuff like that. So I think like taking a page out of what those MMA fighters do, especially Volks with his training, like he's not necessarily pushing crazy in each round, but he's doing extra conditioning, assault bike stuff, crazy workouts outside. And he does do some crazy training workouts, but all safe, very safe. Like when he's redlining like that in the training room, it's a very controlled, safe setting. I think to do that in jiu-jitsu against some of these lunatics out there that are trying to kill you, especially when you have a name, can be dangerous.
So your approach to jiu-jitsu is don't warm up and don't try too hard.
No surgery
for safety. No, for safety though.
Yeah, longevity,
And talk shit about Russians. I got it. I hear you. Oh, you mentioned cage work. What's interesting to you that you learned over all this time about cage work? What's interesting about the dynamics of that? Are you talking about both like the control in the dominant position, but also getting up from the bottom while you're against the cage? All of that. The
added dimension of that cage, that wall being there, changes a lot of stuff, right? So obviously, in some ways, it's a much lower impact wrestling style because you can't be sprawled on. You can shoot, the cage is going to block their feet, you're going to be able to chase down their hips. It's just a completely different fight. And again, because of Islam's judo skills, that upper body controls you see he's able to use against the cage, like the inside trips, sort of the Uchimata style, Harai Goshi throws. So obviously those skills do translate, but yeah, I think the cage is a great equalizer for a lot of things like athleticism and stuff. It takes away a huge speed advantage aspect of the fight.
So he's really good at standing up. What is there? I assume he learned all of that from you and your instructional just stand up.
I mean, we were so confident. I was like, you know what?
Work.
Why don't we put this thing out a month before the fight?
Yeah.
Maybe the illegal download hasn't made its way to Russia yet.
Yeah.
But it was there for him.
Can you explain to me what's in the instructional just stand up? Like what are the ideas?
I mean, the old school way to stand up, people talk about the technical get up, the old Gracie, put the hand, but I mean, that doesn't work. It hasn't worked for 20 years, If you look at everyone that gets up in MMA, they're using turtle to get up. They're using wrestling to get up. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Right.
Which is counter to what pure jiu-jitsu says. They say, don't expose the back. Don't ever expose your back. I think jiu-jitsu is a terrible way to get back to the feet because if you were to retain guard and go half guard or closed guard, super hard positions to get up. You're basically putting yourself in a leg tuck for wrestling. So I think you need to borrow from wrestling to learn how to get up in an MMA fight. So basically how to safely expose your own back while not allowing them to get hooks and use that to get back up, or at least not allow them to get two hooks.
And that applies for MMA especially?
For MMA especially, because obviously striking is a factor, but if they are striking, they don't have locked hands around your body, means you are able to move. You are able to make an attempt to get back up. They have to choose between control, submission, or strikes.